But it's recording TARDIS in color from the
TARDIS
Twilight
coffee, the best
Zone.
kind of coffee.
Maybe you have to grayscale that image. What are those? I haven't
Oh, I don't
seen
know if I
so
can
much
do that.
early Who, and I'm checking out the chairs in the TARDIS, which look like little wicker stools. Yeah,
Well, the thing about the original TARDIS is like it was a stark futuristic set, and then the Doctor would just throw something like that hat rack in, or
yeah.
something just to accommodate some basic concerns that you would have in a living space, because he treats it like a living room, even though we're told there's hundreds of stories of other parts of the TARDIS that we didn't get to see until much later. So
But yeah, like I said, my main Who trip was the Matt Smith run and a little bit of Tenet. So
our good friend Earl just posted a list of like all Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who that's available on Blu-ray. And it had all
ah,
these big gaps in the beginning, but they're talking about all, they're filling in all the
well,
later
they
stuff.
would
Just
just
Tom Baker.
recorded over a lot of them, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, the original, so much of the original stuff got lost because they just wiped it very short-sightedly.
All right. Then you got the
And
prisoner, which made it just fine. So I guess that was more prestige, though. So
yeah, and it also still existed on film. I think a lot of Doctor Who was videotaped back then.
oh
I mean,
yeah, that's a good point.
the as was true in the 70s, who definitely it was like the studio stuff was videotaped, but then the locations were on film. So you get like parts of episodes that were preserved, maybe if they didn't throw out the film.
And
But the film got much better treatment than the videotapes because they were expensive.
you
That's like
can't
saying
record
these
over
CD-ROMs
film.
are really expensive. I'm just going to wipe this one and use it for something else. It's like,
Yeah, you can't reuse the film anyway. So
yeah, you cannot reuse the film, but you can reuse the tape.
let me pull up mine. It's do you have a prologue within visual range?
Uh, you know, I I left the book
Maybe
sitting on the other
maybe
side of the
grab
room, but I can
maybe
probably grab it off the wiki.
yeah, you can get off the wiki. The point being I've just found like Zoom is getting more and more haphazard with its whiteboards and stuff.
Yeah, I've heard you make that complaint often in recent podcasts.
Yes,
Like,
I just started asking people just bring up the wiki for the prologue because I don't like having to go and like edit all the wiggle time.
I'll just type in Horrence Ford.
So I just left in
That's
my Star
Horrence
Trek.
Maxwell Ford to you. Okay, here we go.
I just left in my Star Trek mistake in the last episode. Oops.
I heard that.
They're
I
next to each
said,
other on the DVD.
Taste of Armageddon. What is he talking about?
Well, if he
You know,
watches that,
his Landrews from his amine yards. What's going on
if
here?
he watches that one, it's also fine. I think I did send him a message saying, "Oh, you actually need to watch Archons."
Who are you talking to? Was that Andrew? I can't
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
now.
yeah. Because
Yeah,
I was
okay.
asking him if he ever gets, how he feels about the Landry episode, and he said he hadn't seen it. So, but they're on the same DVD next to each other. So, and
That's good enough.
yeah, both of them are top flight episodes. So watch both of
Let's
them.
do
Why not?
Horns Ford. Preoccupation with another time. All right.
Okay, let's get into this. Hello, welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we delve into all of the episodes of the Twilight Zone and beyond. This is Matt here. Coming back is Brian. Hi, Brian.
Coming to you from my TARDIS of childhood memories.
Yes, yes, yes.
Why not?
You could just have. I just got the background of my room. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I did a search for Horace Ford just to see what images I'd get, and I didn't want any of them as my background. I think with the background, you don't want actors, and like every shot of this is actors, you know.
You didn't get a shot of Randolph Street? Then that
Oh, I
water
guess you could
truck
do a
just
shot.
going
Yeah, I
by
guess there's
over and
the
over and over.
yeah, I guess there's the one wide shot of Randolph Street, but otherwise it's a very actory episode, which is fine. You can do that. That is the incredible world of Horace Ford. Deep into season 4, an episode that no one has ever watched, most likely. Have you seen it before?
I confess I have not. Like I said, I probably outlined this a while ago. I got the DVDs a decade or more ago, and then I didn't really rip them to my computer until the pandemic, and then I started following along with this uh newfangled time enough podcast just to try to, get myself through the whole series. But I think I'd seen some of season 4. I'm trying to remember how that happened. No one in my market really aired the reruns very often, except maybe on late Saturday nights. So how I even got to see that much Twilight Zone in my youth is a mystery. But there are places I vacationed where in Southern California, I think it was KTLA Channel 5 would have Twilight Zone on at noon between the soap operas, because they
Oh,
take
that's
their
the
noon
wrong
break.
time. That's not the right time.
Yeah, but weirdly, it's like an hour. It's usually used for local news or something, I guess, in most markets. But they reran Twilight Zones, and that was awesome for me because when I was on vacation and I had nothing better to do, I could just sit and watch multiple Twilight Zones episodes. But I don't think they aired the hour-long ones either, even then. So it's a mystery how I saw any of them, but I definitely did not see this one and probably most of the rest of the season. So it's all coming as a surprise to me.
No,
I
that
probably
that's
just got the feeling that I read so much about them as a kid. I probably got the feeling I saw them and I didn't.
right. No, that's the tenor of season 4. Like keep coming across people. Yeah, I haven't seen, I've seen 2 episodes of season 4, but it's kind of fun to have a reason to go and take a look at them all.
I just thought it was
Including
funny. I Mandela affected myself into thinking I saw some of them when I did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I honestly, I think I've said it before in the podcast, but I really can't remember when I actually started seeing the original Twilight Zone because they weren't really showing it in the Atlanta markets, and we didn't have cable. So for a long time, the '80s show was what I thought of as the Twilight Zone. It took a while for me to actually get around to seeing the '60s stuff.
I'm starting to think that the Twilight Zone um permeating the consciousness of us is itself a Twilight Zone episode.
Maybe it was the Tower of Terror. Maybe I went to do the Tower of Terror and then like, oh, I need to actually see some of the old school stuff and or something like that. I don't quite remember, but I think the Tower of Terror might have been my initial contact with the somewhat proper Twilight Zone or the
That's what I'm
Rod
saying,
Serling,
though. I
whichever
think
one.
we entered the Twilight Zone to infuse our brains with Twilight Zone knowledge, and then we came out of it and wondering how did we get this knowledge about the Twilight Zone when we had no
Yeah,
opportunity to watch it.
yeah. Well, that's fun. Anyway, I have lots of opportunity here. I have trivia. I have trivia in this episode. The Incredible World of Horace Ford Limit. I'll do that. Original air date was April 18th, 1963. Reginald Rose wrote the teleplay. This is his only trip into the zone, but he won an Emmy and got an Oscar nomination for his various versions of 12 Angry Men. Abner Beaverman directed. He was a character actor in genre pot boilers from the 30s to the 50s. After that, he transitioned to TV directing, helming episodes of Gilligan's Island and Hawaii Five-O. This is his first time in the zone, but he will be back for 2 season 5 episodes. Pat Hingle is Horace Ford. We can cite him for appearing in On the Waterfront, along with several films alongside Clint Eastwood, but we all know him as the Commissioner Gordon that ties together all 4 Burton Schumacher Batman films. Laura Ford was played by Nan Martin. Her credits are a bit all over the place, but I'm going to grasp onto her roles as Freddy Krueger's mother in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, and an appearance in Star Trek TNG's Haven. Ruth White was Mama Ford. She was mostly a Broadway actor with a few TV and film credits. But we should note she is 49 and not 61 in this episode of The Twilight Zone. I was like, well, she's like, I'm 62, whatever she says. Like, that can't be right. So, and it was not right. Leonard O'Brien was played by Philip Pine. We've already seen him in The Four of Us Are Dying, and he has a smattering of other TV guest roles. The Trekkie in me has to note him as the genocidal Colonel Green in Star Trek's The Savage Curtain. To be clear, though, that is not a very good episode, I would say. Vaughn Taylor is Mr. Judson. This is the 4th of 5 appearances in The Twilight Zone. We've already talked about him a bit in Still Valley, Icing the Body Electric, and Time Enough at Last. And I'd probably hit a few trivia points in those if you really want them. Okay, Brian, you have a prologue ready to roll, I think.
I believe I do. Let's see. My fan is making too much noise or not. Mr. Horace Ford, who has a preoccupation with another time, a time of childhood, a time of growing up, a time of street gangs, stickball, and hide and go seek. He has a reluctance to check out a mirror and see the nature of his image, proof positive that the time he dwells in has already passed him by. But in a moment or two, he'll discover that mechanical toys and memories and daydreaming and wishful thinking and all manner of odd and special events can lead one into a special province, uncharted and unmapped, a country of both shadow and substance known as the Twilight Zone.
Um, yeah, for my viewing experience of this, not knowing too much about it, it was kind of interesting in that I came in assuming it was a comedy episode, and it plays out when it starts, it plays like a comedy episode, and then, slowly becomes very much not a comedy episode.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering where it was going. It was interesting, again, to see it for the first time and kind of forget the details about what the storyline was about and just kind of go, oh, is this going to be a young man's fancy thing? Is this going to be a walking distance thing? The music, I think, was from Walking Distance. It sounded like that same Bernard Herrmann score
Yeah, I
from
was kind of
season one.
expecting him to be, a bit of a Mr. Beavis or something.
In a way, it literally was walking distance because he walked down the street to where he used to live. He's within walking distance of his current home.
Although in
So,
this one it is like a creepy time loop, which is
yeah. So then it becomes this time loop. And then almost immediately, uh, Laura, the wife, steps into the zone with him every time the doorbell rings. And it's
Jughead.
Hermie. Yeah, Jughead. Toothless Jughead, as we'll call him from now on. That kid
I
at first was a less like goofy looking, but as the episode went on, he was creeping me out more and more until the very last scene where he totally creeped me out.
that's kind of what I like about this episode, because when I started, I was like, a dumb comedy episode, here we go, and I'm like, wait, this is not. And by the end, I'm like, oh, some of this is getting properly disturbing. So I find like this is kind of a wide range episode, like more so than usual, just in tones it hits.
Well, I think my very first note kind of set the stage for how I was perceiving it. It was like Horace needs some Ritalin because that guy was just all over the map. I don't know how you would describe him, but he seems like he's like on the spectrum kind of a guy. He can't focus on anything. There's like some ADHD going on. He just lives in this past and he talks about it incessantly. And you got to wonder how he even got, you know, a wife or a job if this is the way he's been his entire life. Or
Especially
did
a
this just
hot wife.
happen? Well, maybe he just kind of started moving into this state of mind recently. I mean, as we learn, birthdays hinge into the plot, like where this is about. His birthday coming up is probably
38
the
in
trigger.
1963.
It's the trigger that's making this happen, but there's no indication that he behaved any less erratically or frankly childishly in the years since he became an adult, because he's always talking about the past every time we see him. And it's like he couldn't have always been this way, right? It's like the approach of his birthday brought back the memory of what happened to him regarding his birthday when he was a boy, and what happened with his friends, so-called friends. So
He
that
might have
seems to be the
generally been.
triggering episode, the thing that's triggered this thing. But yeah, it was, if you don't really think about it, then you're just kind of wondering, well, how did this guy ever function in society the way he is? And
I don't know. I just kept thinking that, being that I'm also going through Disney movies, I just kept thinking, I assume this is what John Lasseter is like, but maybe, like Horace Ford doesn't have all the unlicensed hugging, but
well, what did you think of his mental state when you saw him? Did you immediately think, oh, this guy's like on the
annoying,
spectrum or something? Is he
annoying. My note is
annoying?
Horace is a damn annoying one.
Yeah, one of my notes was to the effect of what was it? Oh, he has two modes, petulant and whiny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's not a likable person. And let's look at the prologue again. I mean,
And yet he has friends willing to throw him a surprise birthday party, so he must be likable in some way, but we'll never find out exactly how.
okay, looking back at the prologue, I'm just curious how they paint him as a character, and they don't. They just say he's, is thinking about his childhood, basically. Um,
Yeah,
which
everything's about his childhood constantly, and that's what I was wondering. Did he undergo a change that made him more childish, regressing more and more as his birthday approached until, the whole Twilight Zone door opened wide and he found himself? actually revisiting
Or up
the
to this
past.
point, perhaps he's very annoying but very productive, you know?
Yeah, he seems to be able to keep his nose to the grindstone and crank out toys. So he has this talent to crank out toys, but that's about as far as we get with who he is as a person. He can make toys, good
How do you
toys.
feel about the smell of cat pistols?
The smell of cap pistols.
Yeah,
That's something you don't see anymore. I don't think caps are even a thing anymore, are they?
I don't know, but I do know the smell of cat pistols.
Yeah, well, it's gunpowder basically, right? Hello.
I would think of smells that people seem to like that I don't. Freshly cut grass, I hate. I hate that smell, and people
Oh,
often call
okay.
that a good one. So, um,
I have a cat visitor. You gonna say hi?
cat smells of the cat.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with cat smells. That's something I'm familiar. Hey, buddy, you want to drop in on the podcast? Okay. Well, he does want to drop in on the podcast. Okay.
Japan
Goodbye.
just has a bunch of roving cats. There's a park nearby, and you go, and there's just like 20 cats when you go there. It's kind of wild. Um, I'm not quite sure what the story on the cats are, but
Well, you tell us about that whole island full of cats. It's just
oh,
nothing but
then there's
stray
the
cats.
island. Yes, there's the cat shrine island you can go to. But just even around here, I mean, if I when I walk out the door, I'll probably see a few cats on the way to the train station. We're crawling in cats around here. So I guess that's nice.
Mm.
We never felt the urge to get a pet. Because I'm just too lazy to have a pet. Yeah. When he first starts walking into the past, I was starting to like think of, Francis Ford Coppola rules, Godfather. I started looking for oranges. I was like, if I see oranges, someone's going to die. If I saw cabbages, which I guess means someone's going to get beat up.
Oh, there's movie code if for street scenes, someone will die if you
In the
see a
Godfather
certain
movies, if
fruit.
you see oranges, someone's about to die.
Well, that's good to know because I thought I was going to talk about one of those movies later on with you.
Well, if you think back when Marlon Brando's character dies, he's just eaten an orange.
I remember them making fun of that with Lloyd Bridges in one of the parodies of was it Top Gun or it wasn't a Godfather parody. Some comedy that he was in the 80s and he had an orange in his mouth.
Yeah, well, the Zuckers can, go and they can multi-hit things in their movies back in the day.
I don't know if that was a Zucker Brothers film, but it was a Zucker Brothers adjacent film, I think.
It might have been like two of them or something. I don't know. I think they started splitting up. And what did you say? Top Secret? I forgot what you said. What is it?
I'm trying to remember what film it
Uh,
was, so now I have
Hot
to go
Shots.
look at
Yeah,
it.
Hot Shots. There we go.
Was it Hot Shots? Okay, it
That's
was
the one with
some
Lloyd Bridges, I believe. Yeah. You want
okay,
O.J.
yeah.
Simpson? You got to go to Naked Gun.
Oh, that's true. Oh, here's Rocket Ship XM. I remember that one. It was like an early Lloyd Bridges film.
Oh yeah. Of course, he's not here. Here we're thinking more about our Pat Hingle. I think there's one other character that tie. Oh, it's the whoever I forget who Alfred is in the Burton Schumacher films, but Alfred's always the same, and Pat Hingle's always Gordon in those movies. Because if you watch Batman and then you watch Batman and Robin, there is nothing else in common between those two movies.
Oh, yeah. So it was just Commissioner Gordon and Alfred were the same. That's what I'm trying to remember. That actor showed up on Doctor Who and other British things a lot, but I've forgotten his name. But he was a good Alfred.
Oh, right, the Alfred. Yeah, I mean. Hmm. I did find it interesting when he shows up late coming home from work and they're like, oh, someone must have jumped, which seemed mildly weird, but actually in Tokyo, if the trains are late, that's very likely the case.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the
They play it like she's overly
mother's thing. It's
paranoid
like, did
and
he jump? And
suspicious.
it's like, that's a really dark place to go immediately. Mom, why did you do that?
Oh, maybe that's because I was thinking Tokyo. Like I thought she said, did somebody jump, not necessarily him. So, which is,
To
it'll be
explain
like,
why it was late. Yeah, this is that. Will somebody jump? And it's like, that's usually not my go-to. And I think consider someone's late.
no,
It's
that's
like,
my
was
point.
there a horrible crash?
No, in Tokyo, it is a go-to.
Well, creepily enough, I think after the recession and a lot of businesses failing like 15 years ago, back during that time, there were some instances of that here in the Bay Area. I seem to recall people mysteriously dying in train tracks a lot.
No, I know that in
So
Tokyo they've fortified a lot of bridges to try and keep people from doing that.
they put a fence over the in front of the tracks right by the office I was working at the time, and I was like, "Why is that?" Oh, okay.
Anyway, I was sitting there wondering if that was supposed to be like a dark joke or a more of a reality in the world of this show. So
Well, I didn't look up suicide statistics for New York in 1963, so I couldn't tell you.
right, right, right. Um, he is properly flustered by his weird trip to the past, which is nice. It's not like walking distance where he just instantly starts doing lots of dumb things and ends up, crippling himself a little bit.
Yeah, about the only time he acted like a normal person or like an adult was when he was flustered, when he returned, and he would be very concerned about what he saw, and he actually was more sober-minded at those points in time. But then eventually, his old self would come back and he'd start rambling on about this, that, and the other thing, and getting really petulant about the boss wanting to actually expect him to do work and things like that. And it's like, okay, here's that personality returning again.
Yeah, my note is Horace has already had his second childhood and now he's on his eighth, you know?
Oh, there's a subtle Forbidden Planet call out in this. Did you see?
Oh, it's
The ro
robot.
the robot, yeah, that was one thing. Although in Forbidden Planet, everybody takes the Anne Francis pronunciation of robot, and which is what we're stuck with now. But if you look at the drawing, it looks remarkably like Robbie the Robot. It's got the little sort of balloon tire like effect, he looks like he's made of segments and things. It looks very much like a Robbie the Robot design on his page that he then
Well,
petulantly tears off the wall.
if you really want to see some Forbidden Planet come back next week,
Mm,
or I think
yeah.
they've once again I believe they're using half of the props for Forbidden Planet in next week's episode. So all you get here is the robot, um, which yeah. Actually, I'm looking through in my notes and well, one they keep saying you should see a doctor. You should see a doctor. What kind of doctor? Maybe they need to be a little more specific there. If he goes to
Well,
see the general practitioner, I don't think that's going to be very helpful.
well, it's a place to start to see if there's something physically wrong with them. But yeah, I think they were basically trying to say you need to see a psychiatrist. I think somebody did talk about a mental health, break or something. You need to take some time off. I think the good old Mr. Judson, who I called Mr. Jetson throughout the whole episode because he sounded like he introduced him as Jetson, and I was just thinking
Well, they
George
had
Jetson the
robots
whole
around.
time.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
guess
with robots.
I'm actually looking through here, but I'm like, I actually did kind of call the twist. After I think the second time when you start to realize the loop, I just wrote, are these his childhood traumas he's having to relive? And it's like, oh, okay, it is. So, not that that kills the episode or anything. I'm just like, hey, I called it halfway through. What do you know?
So when you watch the three times he goes back to Randolph Street, did it look to you like they probably reused chunks of the same footage every time? Because there were scenes where his reactions were a little bit different, a little more subdued when he began to realize how weird it was. The first time he was amazed. He was like, "Oh, it's just as I remember it," sort of thing. Certain shots, like the hot dog vendor, I think were absolutely the same shot used three times over. But
Oh
other
yeah,
ones where he breaks up the couple, I think he reacts slightly differently. So I suspect they film like two takes and then you reuse one take in a lot of those cases and then use the other take in the other one because
yeah,
sometimes he needed to behave differently because he was now understanding the bizarreness of the situation.
yeah. Because in the production reality, they're doing all three trips into the past all together. So you
Yeah,
do
they
the
shot it all
shot
the
five
same
times, and three of them end up being
night.
master takes.
And of course, the street was already wet when the truck went down at the first time we saw it. So we know there were multiple takes of the truck water, spouting out of it. I had to think that it was a very clean street by the end of the episode because it got washed over and over and over again.
I guess I can't really do this guy's trip because I live in Japan. So I'm sitting here kind of wondering like and we live in the suburbs. I guess you don't easily just stroll over somewhere. But I'm thinking, where would I end up strolling into? Marty in walking distance strolls into his old town, which is idyllic. Horace Ford walks into his old traumas. Um,
Yeah, did you catch all the cultural references of the time? I mean, the fact that Mickey Mouse was mentioned, it's like, oh, there we go. There's Disney right there. he's definitely
and
exists in this
and the
episode.
data is 20 years in the past, so it would have been like super early, the first wave of
This was like,
intense
yeah,
Mickey Mouse popularity.
1930s, I'm thinking is when he was talking about, right? Or
Yeah,
was it
I had a
40s?
Bugs Bunny watch, but that's because I worked at the Warner Brothers studio store for a couple years. So you can't have a Mickey Mouse watch there, you know?
Well, Horace goes on and on about the various games they play. Remember this game? You never played this game? And then some of them are like, yeah, I've heard of this game. I mean, it's not that obscure. Then other ones are like, I did not know what he was talking about. It was like they might have been very regional to people growing up in the East Coast at the time, but they're no longer, in common currency. But the one thing that I kept wondering about was when he keeps walking right through the couple who are clearly holding hands and they break hands, they look at each other and go, bread and butter. Ha ha ha. And then they walk away and say, what does bread and butter mean?
I don't know. My mom did that. Does
She
that?
did.
Yeah, did. I don't know. So actually, that
She still
didn't.
does.
Yeah,
Your parents do that.
you might
They
still
walk
do
down the
that.
street and wait for Pat Hingle to break them up, and then they say bread and butter.
Well, I think usually you're going around a pole or something, like there's a pole in the way. But
Oh, okay. You see,
no,
that's interesting.
that did not strike me as weird at all because I've heard it plenty.
That
So
okay. Well, then it does that saying does persist at least on your side of the country when you were growing up. I don't think I've ever heard bread and butter used
no,
when.
all of my cultural references are things that came after this that don't fit because they keep going fins, fins. So I start thinking about Parrot Head, fins up, Jimmy Buffett stuff. So that wouldn't make sense in '63. And oh, of course, right after that, the mother keeps going, "Who are we gonna call? Who are we gonna call?" So I'm just like, Ghostbusters, call Ghostbusters, you know? So my cultural references were a little bit later. Well, I was looking at the city, the Raymond Street set, and just being like, I wonder if that is the Singing on the Rain filming location, you know?
Oh, well, which lot was this? This MGM lot, I think.
I'm not sure which lot it was, but I mean, it very likely could have been. So, I was just telling you yesterday because I'd heard on a different podcast that the cover of Prince's Purple Rain and Tobey Maguire doing its upside down Spider-Man kisses at the exact same spot, which is kind of a mind blower.
You mean the same spot on a back lot or the same spot in the city?
Oh, on a back lot. They're
Okay,
both
so
back
it's
lot
not a real
shots.
location. Okay.
Well, it's a real location on the back lot.
Yeah, sometimes the back
But
lot
they
back
use
don't
these spot
exist anymore.
right. They
Yeah.
use these places so much, like we don't even track when it's like the same place over and over necessarily. You redress a little bit, you change the angles, and there's so
Someone somewhere has written a big book of backlots, all the Hollywood studios and how they were laid out from 100 years ago to now, right?
yeah.
They got to still be out there somewhere,
I mean, that's the
like a
what I
list.
remember the most about having seen La La Land is just how they kind of like push the backlot vibe in there. Ironically, at a point when I guess Hollywood has been getting away from backlots.
Well, now the backlot is just a big green screen in a
Yeah, you have the
warehouse.
volume or you're
The
filming like
volume,
way out of LA because of costs.
like Canada,
Yeah.
basically. Happy Canada Day, by the way, as we're recording this
Oh
for
yeah.
you Canadians out there. It's going to be 2 or 3 weeks late by the time you hear it, but
Right, right, right. So you could say happy 4th of July if you want as well. That'll also be
okay.
too
Hey,
late.
happy
That's
4th of
also too
July.
late. Too
Happy
late.
Bastille Day.
Mm. That
No,
sounds more likely. I think we're about at Bastille Day. Now you're making
that's
me look
about
at the calendar to figure
that's
that
the
out.
14th, I think. So two
Yeah, it
weeks
is.
from
It
now.
is. Oh, actually, this is the Bastille Day episode. You called it Happy Bastille Day.
Okay, happy Bastille Day, everyone.
No,
But
I used to try and push that one on people just for fun.
I keep thinking of uh a backlot like in Culver City, not far from where Shaney was growing up. Does no longer exist, but it's the one that a lot of Star Trek episodes used. But I forget if it was owned by a particular studio or what, but it was like where like Return of the Archons and stuff. We were talking about that earlier. Landru reigns
Not a taste
supreme.
of Armageddon. Return of
Yeah,
the Archon.
yeah,
No,
though
got
you
that
look at
cleared out.
those streets now and yeah, that's basically an Apple store now. So that's just kind of weird to think about.
But I guess it just happens when you're watching all these Twilight Zones in succession like this, and it's all being filmed in there, and you just start eyeing, like, oh, there's that living room again, there's that dining room again. Hey,
Well, also,
where else have I seen
yeah,
this? What Western did this concentration camp end up in, you know?
or yeah, or even the locations, like how many times you've seen Vasquez Rocks in Westerns before you saw it in Star Trek, that sort of thing.
Right, right. So it's watching a show and every episode. It's just kind of fun to track that sort of stuff. And yeah, the city in this episode, well, there's the office that's come up, so we keep seeing
We
similar
see the
offices.
same office over. I got really tired of the backdrop outside the window depicting the, the facade of the building across the street. After seeing it a few times, I was like, this looks terrible. And this is DVD resolution. I can't imagine on Blu-ray it looks any more convincing.
My favorite recent backdrop was when the U.S. Capitol is directly outside of the Oval Office.
Yeah, you mentioned that one on
That's
My
by
Dream of
far.
Jeannie. That was very funny.
Yeah, I'm like,
It's
no,
right there.
that is not correct at all. There's nothing correct about that. So
I just saw something else the other, maybe it was this episode. No, I don't know. The Brooklyn Bridge was like right around the corner, just looming over them. Maybe it was this episode. Did we see the Brooklyn Bridge in this episode? Because that seemed unlikely as well, that they just happened to be next to the Brooklyn Bridge. But maybe they
this
were. I don't know.
I wasn't really tracking what city it was, to be honest. I mean, yeah, New York, but it's got the New York vibe. But maybe in part because I'm just like at this point being like, I know that backlot. I'm not thinking too hard about where it actually is now. It's
Well, I
like,
mentioned the whole thing about even the backlots don't exist anymore is kind of a, the fact that inside the story itself, Randolph Street doesn't look radically different from the way it did as a kid. It just had no people on it. It was night, everything was closed. It was kind of the way you expect the street to look at night, and not uh, you know, all sorts of activity, people wandering, kids playing, water trucks watering, hot dog vendors. That was really the only change I saw on the street. There was no structural differences or anything that I could see, like, oh, they tore down that building, sort of thing, which are impractical to do, really, of course, with that
I guess
budget.
that is
But
a popular early 60s thing, the city street of young hooligans. Ben Grimm comes from Yancey Street. The Fantastic Four is doing this sort of stuff at the same time in comic books. So
what's the tropish thing to do to make a area look like it's descended into depravity? Is like what, put up neon signs everywhere or something? Girls, girls, girls.
hey, neon's cool. Okay.
Well, now we retro consider it cool, but I think it was, it started out cool, then it became, oh, this is tacky, and now it's cool again, or something like that. But there was
Well,
no radical redesign of the set, is what I'm trying to say, between his past and the current time. So,
yeah, it doesn't have the wild stylization of something like The Four of Us Are Dying, where they had that insane neon city background that they were just like, like surrealistic
it was
background
just
that
a
they were kind of filming
montage
through.
of signs flying by. It wasn't even on the set really very
No, they
often.
had built some weird city facade, and it seemed they were filming that,
Oh,
and so it was
oh,
very
yeah, yeah,
stylized. Which
it was.
this,
That's okay.
if I do have something that I felt this episode did not really have much going for it visually, other than we're repeating the time loop. That's about it in this episode. Otherwise, it doesn't really, to me, have much of a visual signature.
No, no. And the fact that he was, um, you know, we expect him to be disbelieved because that's what happens when something weird happens to somebody in the Twilight Zone. They're going to be disbelieved. But then the fact that almost immediately his wife sees confirmation of some kind that it happened when uh homie homie, I'm getting Horace and homie mixed up, showed up
Mhm.
at his front door with the watch. So you think, oh, well, she must know that something's up. But she never mentions the fact that this kid that fits the description of his childhood friend shows up at the door, nor does she even mention the fact that his watch was found and returned to him, because he knows he dropped it before he left Randolph Street for the night and came home. He never misses the watch. There's never a conversation about, well, how did my watch get back on my dresser this morning?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I put
So
Laura.
that part of the story didn't quite sync up. They just kind of glossed over that.
I'm like, Laura must be like at least as nuts as Horace after that kid encounter, right? But like you said, that I mean, we were getting to the questions earlier, but that pretty much means she's also having a full trip through the Twilight Zone. Although she's not
Yeah,
walking through down Randolph Street, I guess, so that's different. But
she's seeing the Twilight Zone bleeding in because, well, that's not even the end of it, because the party happens and the same kid shows up at the door, only this time with a watch that doesn't exist anymore, that fits the description of his old Mickey Mouse watch. But the whole room full of people saw him. So if they were to say, well, what did he look like? Oh, he had a beanie and he's missing a tooth. You'd say, okay, that's again the same kid. Now, whether or not that was truly the same kid that he grew up with or just the current day kid, but he was dressed in the right style. He fit the description. It all lends credibility to Horace's story that he's been telling all along, that he saw these things. But then nobody's like, oh, you're right. Everybody's still kind of like, oh, you've got problems. Let's find a doctor.
And
It's
then,
like,
oh, we should also mention he gets fired on his birthday, and then they still have the party, which is weird.
I don't think, yeah, they didn't get the notice because I think he just got fired and they were apparently around the corner somewhere. As soon as he stormed out of the, like 10 seconds after he storms out and down the hall, he passes the entire party somehow and it comes to the front door to say surprise. Uh,
Yeah, I guess it's just a few awkward moments, but yeah, definitely like 8 different awkward setups for that. Again, that's where it's like it is weird. This is like, it's not far from a comedy episode. They just take it, it becomes such like a rough ride into the Twilight Zone, you know? Like the bath salts of the Twilight Zone this week.
well, did we touch on the fact that this was not originally written for the Twilight Zone?
I did note that the writer was some guy, which I was not familiar with.
Oh,
You
according to
want
the
to?
Twilight Zone Companion, this was actually already aired in the 50s, like as part of a different story, another playhouse something or other. Let me see. I'm sure Wiki has something about it. It was a teleplay for Westinghouse Studio One that originally aired in June of 55, starring Art Carney in the role of Horace Ford, which had a different ending, like a downbeat ending, apparently. So
Oh,
he just
yes, yes. Okay, I did see this. I did not put in my notes
so they
probably
bought the
because
script and then just shot most of it the same, except the ending they gave a little more positive spin on it. But it in the Studio One's version, story ends at Ford's apartment, with the audience invited to assume that he's been permanently transported back to his miserable past as a child. So it's a little more like kick the can, like everybody gets turned into kids and runs away. The end.
it is
So it's
interesting though. It is. I mean, it feels pretty Twilight Zoney. I mean, so it's kind of interesting that it did pop up that early.
before Serling ever wrote, the time element, this story was already shown, and we've seen this happen, like with, I think it was a One Step Beyond. There was some
There's the Hitchhiker,
older
which had,
stories,
and
yeah, that.
there's the Hitchhiker, which had several iterations. So there's always like the O. Henry story or whatever. So it's not like that's where things not in the, but the Twilight Zone's like, I guess a specific strain of it for sure. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting that this one is very slightly retrofitted. They could have given this the dark ending and it would have been fine, you know?
They must have really wanted to run with it, despite the fact that it had, like we've already discussed, certain similarities to other Twilight Zones about going into one's past. But they went to the trouble of buying and producing it. I mean, there was an 18 episode season, but they were hour longs, and we've talked about how some of them seemed like a little, stretched out,
And it is
half-hour scripts
mid-season. It
padded
is
out. Yeah.
mid-season. So, like it started in January. Whatever replaced it in September was canceled by then.
So
So
man,
yeah.
they would have trouble coming up with scripts. Of course, there's the famous example later in season 5 of an entire different film being used as an
Yes.
episode of the Twilight Zone. We'll get to
Granted,
that
that's also a
someday.
36 episode season. So,
And now that one was huge. Well, yeah, so it just made me wonder about the production realities. I mean, we've also discussed the fact that Mr. Charles Beaumont was on the decline and didn't really write anything after this season of his own,
oh yeah,
right?
halfway through it, it seems that
Yeah, he
he
was
turned
just out
halfway
of it,
into
and
the
his friends
season.
were writing the scripts for him. So I wonder if they came up short in that regard. Were they expecting a Beaumont script? Of course, George Clayton Johnson's still around, Rod's still around, of course. Earl Hamner's popping up time and again. So,
Matheson's still somewhere in the mix, I believe. Although
and Matheson.
he was around several episodes ago. So, let's do some questions then. Who exactly in this episode goes into the Twilight Zone? I think we've pretty much said flat out Horace did, and his wife did, also.
His
Um,
wife was touched by the Twilight Zone, at least in the sense that she saw something that she probably couldn't explain. Well, she
I get-
could explain it as something other than what it really was, but it confirms to the audience that what he's seen is real. So there's little ambiguity in our minds what's going on.
Mom does not come in contact with Twilight Zone, but she does become the most hysterical. But I guess that's being an overbearing
That's
mom.
$140 a week. Where are we going to get that? It's
Yeah.
like,
So
oh, to live on $140 a week.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, no one else sees it. The coworker, Leonard, he was kind of creeping me out because he like was overly friendly with his wife, I thought. Hey, come on in, let me give you a peck on the cheek.
Maybe they, I don't know.
That was a little, yeah, that was a little like, well, was there something going on with him that we should be knowing about? Because I still don't understand how Horace landed a wife in the first place. If that was his personality, he's always prattling on about things going on
Yeah, I mean that's a
secretly.
very strong mismatch of a couple, especially because she is so sensible, right? It's like, how does this work? I mean, I know they say opposites attract, but these people don't fit together. So,
Right, right.
I guess we'll keep the second question mostly to Horace and Laura then, if they deserve their trip into the Twilight Zone. I guess for Horace, it's like, do you deserve to, confront your past traumas?
Well, the whole thing, in hindsight, you realize, like I said, I think it's triggered by the encroaching birthday that made him remember this other birthday and how badly it went. And yeah, it does seem like he was carrying a lot of trauma around with him. And so he had to go to the Twilight Zone to have it beaten out of him because he becomes a child, he gets beaten up. We see him, she sees him as a child. Again, okay, there's no more evidence that something weird's going on. There's a boy there. She goes, ah. She turns around. He's now adult again. Same bruises. Something happened to him.
She has a much better time of it than the Young Man Fancy's wife, though, for sure.
Oh yeah, well, she isn't basically kicked out of his life, and you have the again the adult man regresses into a child. At least he comes back. That's the new ending. That's the old ending was closer to one man's fancy. He becomes a child
Maybe
and
that's why
doesn't
they
come back.
changed it because, like I was
Yeah,
saying,
because it was
being dark isn't an issue here. So it might
and
just
it
be like
sounded
that's too
too much
much.
like that episode. Yeah.
But then last week was I Dream a Genie. So what's yeah, that was just like they've already done this. So
Yeah. So he certainly deserved it in the sense that it was definitely a supernatural thing that happened to him because at least one other person got pulled into it. And he sounded a lot more sober at the end. Again, when he was depressed, Horace, he sounded more like a sober adult person than the rest of the time when he was just kind of ranting. He sounded like he could have used a little bit of medication in his life to get to where he was. I don't know how he got to where he was
yeah, I am. I
without
guess when I
some
was like
sort of treatment to make him a little less anxious and hyper all the time. I don't still understand.
yeah, I guess when I was saying when they're like what kind of doctor, I'm wondering at what point people would just go straight to like you need to see a psychiatrist because that's what let's see. And Peanuts, is it who's got the psychiatric booth? Is it Lucy? And it says the doctor is in, so it's still a doctor at that point, I guess.
Hmm.
I'm just wondering when people started thinking about mental health strongly enough to differentiate a doctor and a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever.
Psychiatrist and then counselor, then therapist
Yeah, yeah.
are the words I seem to hear more often with regards to mental health.
So
But
yeah.
so the Twilight Zone may have helped him in that regard. Of course, now he has to go back to his office and apologize profusely and get his job back, and then things should hopefully be more normal.
Well, he can claim an actual nervous breakdown, I believe,
He
without
could make
having
the
to bring up
claim.
the Twilight Zone stuff. He can keep that to himself and still be like, I had a nervous breakdown, you know?
Well, you can show up at Mr. Jetson's office with hat in hand and say, I'm very sorry. I'm going to do everything you want me to do, and everything will be fine after this. I'm better.
Well, he got a
So,
new job as a police
or
commissioner,
he might get a new job. I mean, he can look, everybody has a competitor, right? He can go work for some other toy company.
police
He went from
commissioner.
Hasbro to Mattel to wherever he went to next.
um, his wife, I guess she doesn't. Well, she more just got spooked, I guess. I don't know. I mean, she's not having a good week, that's for sure, but she's having less direct mental trauma. She's not having a nervous breakdown. Mom is, and Horace is. I guess Laura keeps it together
Yeah,
for the most
she
part.
did not have a good time, but like I said, I think we're left with the upbeat ending that they put on it. So we're supposed to believe that things are going to be better now, and so mom will calm down. She she'll be better. Hopefully she's not messing around with Leonard at the office on the side.
Would not surprise me if she was.
I just there's that subtext there. I'm sorry, I saw it and I can't unsee it.
Well, at least it's not like The Office from a few weeks ago where they were carousing and
Oh,
again, I Dream of Jeannie,
I Dream of Jeannie,
the
where
swinger office. No problem with that here.
which
Let's
is the
put
same office that miniature guy Robert Duvall was in like a couple weeks before that.
yes, yes. I guess that was the most functional of the offices. He just wasn't fun.
And everyone wore a suit and tie because that's the way you did it.
Let's put this one the tripometer. Where do you want to number this one?
Triple meter question. Um, for a Twilight Zone, I guess given its province as a outside script, it seemed a little more trippy than usual in the fact that, I mean, we've seen a lot of these things before, you know, seeing your youth again, seeing things going on in the past, but that was like a time loop almost. I kept thinking when I first saw it, I was like, is something going to happen that's going to break the cycle? Is he going to do something that changes it? And I guess
Yeah, he's gonna
ultimately
get
he
beat up.
did. He got beat up. So that was the thing that broke the cycle, but it wasn't a true time loop. Maybe it was just him on that dark street every night, just reliving everything in his head and not actually. But again, physical evidence, his boyhood self was seen by Laura, you know,
Like the time
Bernie
Captain
was seen by
Picard got out of the
Laura.
time loop by murdering himself.
So you can either see that as strange writing without closing the loopholes, or you could see it as a higher level of trippiness in that there were things going on that defied explanation that were seen by other people that they couldn't explain. So I would say it definitely, I don't know, I'd at least give it a 3, I think, because it's so like I said, it's just unlike another Twilight Zone. So it's trippy by by the fact that it's less like a Twilight Zone. It kind of took some of its own tropes and spun them a little differently, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking three because it time loop I think is kind of a new one for the Twilight Zone, and again it's a sci-fi thing I don't think they've done much at this point, but no higher than three because there's just nothing visual here that's particularly trippy or interesting. I mean, it looks like a
Yeah,
sitcom, you know.
there was nothing visually interesting. There was a time loop a while back, although the we didn't realize
Oh,
it till the
Shadow
end.
Play, that was a dream time loop, yeah.
That was a dream. No, I'm thinking of Death Ship.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. There's been Death Ship
There's
and
the crash, and then
Judgment
they say, "Oh,
Night.
that's the future. Oh no, we can't go take off, but we have to take off." And then
I guess
so,
this is the first fully physical time loop because Death
yeah.
Ship and Judgment Night seem to take place in some weird, you know, in between world ether, and Shadow Play was all dreams. So, but this is a very practical, just like he walks over here, it's the past, and it's the same past every time.
Hmm.
He could just start avoiding Randolph Street too, I suppose, but or maybe he can't. I don't know. Maybe there's a draw.
Well, again, it was again within walking distance of his house, apparently. So he could just walk a different direction. I don't know if he goes. We don't hear about him going back to that street anytime between his childhood and this episode. So maybe he didn't walk over there very often.
I guess the most interesting thing about this character, this episode, is just how Pat Hingle is pitching the character. Like it's, I keep talking about how there's a lot of old Hollywood and new Hollywood acting in here, and it's almost like he's trying to do a little bit of both in this. I mean, he seems to be a more old school guy, but like you said, when he is depressed, he acts more like someone from a movie in the 70s, you know? And then
But
he's like kind of like weird, annoying, goofy guy
he's
the rest
way
of the
over the
time.
top as his normal persona, and it's just strange to watch because we're supposed to be led to believe that he behaves this way all the time, and yet he still has friends. He's, he still has a wife. He still has a job, and it's like there's no mention whatsoever that he's in any way special or anything other than he's a brilliant toy designer. So I guess
Well,
they just
that's
write it
something.
off as an excess. He's eccentric. That's how they brought it off. He's just really eccentric.
I
We
guess
wouldn't
that's
pitch
why
it
I
in
kept
terms of
thinking
any
of
sort of, yeah.
that's why I kept thinking of John Lasseter, I guess, until he was actually, found to be doing kind of like sleazy stuff. But before that, he always seemed like you look at videos and stuff because some of us did watch all the Toy Story special features, and he just comes across like that way, like way too Genki, and he's wearing this loud Hawaiian shirt.
So I guess there are people in the world like that who are, successful despite their eccentricities, and I guess he was just one of those people.
Right,
But I
right.
just got a really strong vibe of he needs some sort of medication to to function normally, but he doesn't have it because they didn't have it in 1963, maybe,
Or you
or
could take up meditation. That could work too. Try
well,
that if you
whatever
can't
he's
get
doing,
something
he's not
else. Yeah,
working.
well,
Well,
yeah, it's not working.
I think he just drinks too much coffee. Maybe that's it. Maybe he's just on the caffeine high most of the time, and that's why he acts that
Well,
way.
there's always one of those in an office.
But I was really curious to see what your response to that was. Like, do you think he had what we would define as a mental condition of some kind, or is that just like a lot of Twilight Zones? They're eccentric characters, but you would look at them through today's lens and think he might need a little, therapy or something to work through something.
Well, I think the thing with this is there's his existing problem of being annoying and hyper, and then there's this current problem of basically childhood PTSD coming to the forefront. So there's like
Right.
I think it's two separate issues.
Right.
Which
There's one on top of the other. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which again is maybe why the chop of the character is so weird from scene to scene. Because
Yeah, I just wonder what you thought because I don't feel qualified to talk about such things as autistic spectrum or things like that, but that's kind of what I was hit with when I saw it, and so I was like, well, I need to figure out how does this work?
yeah, there's something undiagnosed going on here, but that's the thing in 1963. I guess it's harder to get it, uh, not looked at. Looked at's the wrong word. Looked at,
Mhm.
sure, why not? Dealt with.
Evaluated,
Yeah,
evaluated.
evaluated. Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Words with a little, few more syllables. Yes. Um, I guess we'll bring this one to a close unless you got another big point on it
Oh,
or a small point. Doesn't have to be a big point.
one of the little background details that caught my eye, which it's a subject that gets brought up from time to time, like in the shelter, is the fact that there's civil defense posters hanging in the office because we live in a Cold War era where, we're expecting nukes to be dropped on us, perhaps by the Russians at any time. So there's actual civil defense posters. They probably say duck and cover if you could read it more closely.
Yeah, yeah.
That was kind of a weird little subtext to the episode. I mean, everything in it dates it, of course, in terms of its style and everything, but that also gave it a very specific sort of edge to it. Like, oh yeah.
I mean, in my
uh,
elementary school, we still had the fallout shelters with the radiation symbol all over the
hmm
place. We still actually, when I
I
was in elementary school, we still had the atomic drills, which were exactly the same as the tornado drills.
I never had atomic. I don't think I ever had atomic drills when I was a kid, which is
No,
weird because
they called it atomic and they called it tornado, but it was the same thing. You just go out into the hall and crouch into the corner of the hallway or the you know what I mean, not the side of the hallway, whatever. Anyway, they're the same drill for tornadoes and atomic, but they wouldn't have helped in atomic. We did not get under the desks. I don't know. Maybe we were just yeah. These are first grade memories, so maybe I could be remembering it wrong.
oh, okay. Other than that, let's see. One piece of humor I couldn't pass up was the wall is
Snickers.
painted with a sign that says "Post no bills," but it's covered with bills. So the sign did nothing to deter them from doing that. And also the ending. Do we talk about Hermie up on the lamppost just gazing into the camera creepily?
Oh, right,
He
right.
broke
That's
the fourth wall. He's looking straight into the camera and is like Twilight Zone. It's like, it's creepy Hermie. It's when he became the most creepy.
yeah.
It's like,
Put
how did he
him.
get all the way up on that lamp? Well, I guess a kid could climb up there,
I guess
maybe,
it's
but
like the look of at the end of the dummy, that sort of thing. You just got to get the creepy glance. The dummy's creepier, to be fair, but
yeah, the dummy actually looked into the camera too, as did his Who was formerly the dummy, or however
Right.
that worked.
I guess we'll plop this one into the pond today then. That's a new
Sure.
expression. Okay. Anyway, if you dig this, you can support us. We do other podcasts on Patreon at Podcastio Podcastius. Brian and I also talk about Space 1999 on Podcast 1999. You sometimes show up at Films and Filth, where we talk about what are supposed to be really good movies and really bad movies according to the Internet Movie Database. And there's video game stuff like Luke Loves Pokemon and the Game Show. Okay. Wow, yeah, I don't know. I guess who you're gonna call is all I have for the end of this one.
Mr. Hop Hop.
That's enough silence for me to chart. Let's see. What did I tomorrow I have to do Spy Kids 4.
My note was Mr. Hop Hop is the best name ever. It's like
Um,
everyone's praising him for coming up with that name. And it's like, really? That's the best he could do was Mr. Hop Hop, and they think that was great. And why do they think this guy's such a great toy maker again?
I don't think we've talked about it specifically, but I could do your Wednesday probably for a matter of balance. I'll check in with Mark if that's cool with you.
Oh, I thought Mark was just out this week and we couldn't do
No,
spaces.
just today. He had to
Oh,
play like right now he's doing something. So
I think Wednesday I actually have an appointment in the afternoon, so I won't be
that's
home.
fine because we can easily skip a week right now. So
I kind of figured we would be probably skipping some time here
yeah,
around
yeah. And
the
we're coming to
holidays.
the end anyway, so there's not even that many episodes, right? So
And I think you were going to be gone in a week or two doing something
oh,
because
that's
you were
gonna be the
pushing
first
things.
2 weeks. Oh, no, that's for the Twilight Zone chat, but not for
Oh, okay.
podcast recording. That's the 14th, 15th of July. But that doesn't affect podcast recording. It just affects the chats.
Oh, so
Um,
you'll be busy to do the chats. Okay.
and then the first 2 weeks of August is when Luke and my schedule goes insane, so we might not be around so much then. Right.
105 outside. Yay.
I'm pretty sure it's not that. One, of course, we go Celsius, so I could tell
Well, I
you
can
this.
push the Celsius button if that
No,
helps you.
actually, yeah, I want to know the Celsius.
Let me see.
What is
Is there a Celsius
105
button?
Celsius? Or I could use this computer to tell me, I suppose. I'm gonna
Up,
guess it's like
set, and
38.
down.
Oh, no, it
Let's
actually might be
see.
more than 38.
It says
So
48-hour high, 114. I can't believe it hit 114 at any point.
Fahrenheit to Celsius conversion. Let's see
Well,
here.
yeah, I could do it that way too.
105.
More
Oh,
fun to
yeah, yeah.
push
When
a
it says
button.
40 degrees, I'm like, that's too hot. You said 115, 46? Yeah, it never gets that
Uh,
hot.
I'm seeing 114 as the all-time high on this. It must have hit that, I don't know,
Oh,
one
the
time
all
some,
time. Okay.
but that's like when I say all time, it probably was this summer, so it must be like within the past few weeks. I don't remember getting that
Yeah,
hot.
about the hottest it gets where I am is 95. But Tokyo and some other places will get a little hotter. So,
It just went to 106. Yeah, so what's 40? 40 is a good benchmark.
oh, 40. Let's go back to
40 C2F is
40 is
104.
104.
Yeah.
So 40 is where you are right now. And when I
So yeah.
I lived in the Kanto plain for a while, and it's the hottest place in Japan, and it would get 40. I think that it's gone up to like 42 there, but here in Nagano, we're got a little altitude, and it
Yeah, I
usually
know
doesn't
you're
make it.
in
And I
the
mean, we're
hills. It
inland, but
helps.
we're not that inland, because nowhere in Japan is that inland.
True. You don't get you don't escape the effects of the ocean altogether. 30 to 40 Celsius is 86 to 104 Fahrenheit. See, that's what people who are used to Fahrenheit complain. Say the Celsius degrees are too big because that mere 10 degrees encompasses what
Yeah, but we have like
22
35
degrees.
point something, it usually gives you the decimal as well. So
Yeah, but we Americans are lazy and we don't want to have to convert and use fractions.
yeah, it's just funny because I mean I still I remember how Fahrenheit works and I know how Celsius works, but I don't like they're like mutually exclusive in my mind. I don't they don't really I haven't thought about what the Fahrenheit temperature would be anytime recently because I'm just like, well, it's 23 right now. Actually, what is it right now? Let's find out. Oh, it's actually telling me in Fahrenheit. What do you know? 76 where I am. So
35. So the halfway point is 35 between 30 and 40, and that translates into 95 Fahrenheit. That's definitely getting warm. I'm trying to think, well, what point will I consider things unbearably hot? And I say at least 33, 35. That's when it
yeah,
hits the
I
90s.
get very unhappy once we get to 30. So but I'm
Well,
not I don't like hot that much. Summer is not my favorite season.
well, I'm glad to hear you don't have to deal with 114 or whatever.
And then it doesn't get I mean the one time I was in the Bay Area was New Year's and it wasn't that cold. I guess it's very Mediterranean climate or whatever.
Well, again, I'm kind of out here closer to the valley. That's why the temperatures get hot. But then we are usually blessed with the marine air coming up through San Francisco Bay and into the Delta and cooling us off at night. But that doesn't always happen. So last night, the temperatures didn't get below 80 degrees Fahrenheit until well after midnight. We're used to it being, closer to 70 or below by that point. But if you want to talk about San Francisco proper, I'm sure it's much cooler over there, right?
Now in winter when I'm walking home, it's I know sometimes it's like -10. What is that in Fahrenheit? 14 degrees. Okay. I guess that's not the worst if you're from the Midwest or something.
Well, to a California like me, anything below freezing is terrible.
The lowest I've seen was -20, which is -4 Fahrenheit, but that was like once. That was like super cold. My gloves weren't even working that day.
So the eastern shore of San Francisco Bay is in the high 70s. So it's a little warm down there. It gets hotter down San Jose, of course. San Jose is again kind of a enclosed basin, so things tend to heat up.
That's
But
a
once you get over
big
the
difference.
hills,
Yeah.
yeah, it gets up into like the 90s from the 70s, and that's just within 10 miles of each other. But of course, you go across the bay, and it's 58 degrees in San Francisco, 60.
Oh, you
I've
got to
seen
move. You got
58
to
to
move over
60.
there. Yeah, that sounds much nicer.
I
Wow,
did
I
live in
didn't.
San Francisco for a long time, actually. I lived in there in the 90s, and it was like these temperatures, the fog rolls in. Summers, like who was it famously? Mark Twain said, the coldest winter I ever spent was the summer in San Francisco.
No, and I worked at the whale camp on Grand Banana Island, and I remember being in fog for like a pretty much a complete week. I remember there's a group of kids that came for a week. I was like, "Oh, you kids never saw the island, huh?" And I was like wearing a field coat, and it was July, you know.
There used to be and there used to be back in the old days, when webcams were new, a page full of San Francisco webcams, and I could bring it up and see what it looks like. But I'm willing to bet it's foggy on the coast right now. I
Mm.
don't even have to look at it, just judging from those temperatures.
Well, anyway, I guess you got work, I got work, so I'll say
Yeah, I
goodbye to the
gotta
people who have been
head
listening to our weather talk. If
out
you're
into
still
the
listening to our weather
105
talk,
degree temperatures.
that's amazing.
It's fun.
Bye.